From humble beginnings to leadership, a story of integrity and justice. What if the person everyone overlooked became the one in charge? This is the story of Sarah Collins, a waitress who dared to challenge injustice and changed everything. But here's the real question. What would you do in her shoes? Would you risk everything for what's right? Stay with us until the end. And if this story resonates with you, comment the number 68 below. Sarah Collins worked at Riverside Diner, a classic American eatery with checkered floors, red vinyl booths, and a nostalgic glow of neon signs. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling burgers, crispy bacon, and freshly brewed coffee, a familiar comfort to truckers, families, and night shift workers alike. The hum of a jukebox in the corner, mixed with the clatter of plates and the chatter of regulars swapping stories over milkshakes and stacks of pancakes. But beneath the lively atmosphere, a toxic work culture thrived, one built on favoritism, discrimination, and power plays. Sarah, a dedicated worker, had always kept her head down, choosing to serve customers with care despite the unfairness around her. However, one fateful night changed everything. The night that changed it all. It was a Friday evening, the peak of the dinner rush, when everything changed for Sarah Collins. The air inside Riverside Diner buzzed with noise, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation, and the sizzle of burgers hitting the grill. The smell of freshly brewed coffee blended with the savory aroma of fried food, creating a comforting yet overwhelming atmosphere. Sarah had been on her feet for hours, her legs aching from the nonstop movement between tables. But she didn't have time to rest. The rush was still at its peak, and she had orders to fulfill. Across the diner, Lisa and Brad leaned against the counter, laughing and chatting without a care. Unlike Sarah, they weren't scrambling to take orders or check on customers. Instead, they were doing what they always did, cherry-picking who they wanted to serve. A businessman in a designer suit had just walked in, and Lisa immediately straightened her posture, flashing her best customer service smile as she waved him over. Brad smirked, nudging her playfully. "Bet he tips big," he muttered under his breath. Then, another man entered. Unlike the businessman, this newcomer didn't exude wealth. He was middle-aged, dressed neatly but modestly in a button-down shirt and dark slacks. His posture was relaxed, his hands casually tucked in his pockets, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the restaurant with quiet observation. Something about him was different, not in an obvious way, but in a way that Sarah couldn't quite put her finger on. Lisa barely glanced in his direction before turning away. Brad didn't even bother acknowledging him. The hostess at the front hesitated for a moment, then shifted her gaze elsewhere. No one moved to greet him. No one made any effort to acknowledge his presence. The message was clear. He wasn't considered important enough. Sarah felt a familiar pit in her stomach. She had seen this scenario play out before. Customers who didn't fit a certain profile were ignored or served with less enthusiasm. It was an unspoken rule at Riverside Diner, one that Mark, the manager, had never addressed and possibly even encouraged. It wasn't just about wealth. It was about assumptions. Who looked like they would tip? Who looked like they belonged in this diner? Who was worth the effort? Seconds stretched into an awkward silence. The man remained patient, but Sarah could sense that he was aware of what was happening. The air felt thick with the unspoken divide between those who were deemed worthy of service and those who weren't. Sarah clenched her jaw. Every instinct told her to follow the same path as her co-workers, to avoid drawing attention to herself, to keep her head down and just do her job. After all, challenging the norm in this place could mean trouble. She had bills to pay, responsibilities to handle, and a job she couldn't afford to lose. But something inside her refused to stay silent. She exhaled, squared her shoulders, and took a decisive step forward. If no one else was going to serve him, she would. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Riverside Diner. What can I get for you?" she asked with a warm, genuine smile. The man turned his head toward her, his gaze meeting hers for a brief moment. There was no immediate response. Instead, he seemed to study her, as if gauging her intentions. Then, after a beat, a slow smile formed on his lips. "Well," he said, his voice smooth and composed, It's nice to finally be noticed. Sarah felt a flicker of something. Relief, maybe even satisfaction. She took his order, ensuring she got every detail right. As she moved to prepare his meal, she could feel the stares of her co-workers burning into her. Lisa rolled her eyes dramatically. Brad muttered something under his breath. Mark, standing near the entrance to the kitchen, had noticed too. His expression was unreadable, but Sarah knew one thing for certain. He wasn't pleased. Still, she ignored them. She focused on the task at hand, making sure the man's burger was cooked exactly as he had requested, his fries extra crispy, his coffee brewed fresh. When she placed the tray in front of him, he nodded in appreciation. "That was quick," he said, picking up the coffee cup and turning it slightly in his hand. Sarah smiled. "We try our best." The man studied her for another moment before speaking again. "You have a good attitude. You know that." The comment caught her slightly off guard. "I just believe in treating people right," she replied simply. His expression held something unreadable. "That's a rare quality." He took a sip of his coffee, then added, "And I think you deserve more than what you've been given." Sarah blinked, unsure of how to respond. Before she could say anything, he gave her one last, knowing smile and turned his attention to his meal. From across the room, Mark's fingers drummed against the counter. His expression had darkened considerably. Sarah knew what that meant. She just put a target on her back. The betrayal and the call that changed everything. The next morning, Sarah was called into Mark's office. The moment she stepped inside, she felt the tension in the air. The room smelled of stale coffee. The blinds were half drawn, and stacks of unorganized papers cluttered the desk. Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "We've decided to make some cuts," he said, his voice void of sympathy. "Effective immediately, you're let go." Sarah blinked, her breath catching in her throat. "What? But why?" She knew the answer before she even asked, but she needed to hear it out loud. Mark sighed, shaking his head like he was dealing with an insubordinate child. "Let's just say, your attitude doesn't align with company values." There it was. The unspoken rule of Riverside Diner. Fall in line or get out. Sarah gritted her teeth, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. She wanted to argue, to fight back, to demand a fair explanation. But what good would it do? The decision had already been made. Mark was getting rid of her, not because she was a bad worker, but because she had dared to treat a customer with basic respect. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. Just before she walked out, Mark spoke again. "Oh, and Sarah?" She turned back, her eyes blazing with frustration. "Next time, keep your head down." Those words echoed in her mind long after she left. Underscore. That night, she sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. A single lamp flickered beside her, casting long shadows across the walls. Her final paycheck sat unopened on the coffee table, next to a half-eaten sandwich she had lost her appetite for. How was she supposed to pay rent? What about Ethan, her younger brother, working himself to the bone in law school, relying on her support? She couldn't tell him. Not yet. He had enough on his plate without worrying about her. Her phone vibrated on the couch beside her. She almost ignored it, but something urged her to pick it up. An unfamiliar number. She hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Hello." A deep, steady voice responded. "Good evening, Sarah Collins. This is James Whitmore." She sat up straighter, her heart pounding. I'm sorry, who?" "We met at Riverside Diner," he said smoothly. "I believe you served me last night." Her mind raced. The man, the one no one had wanted to serve. The one she had helped anyway. "I assume you're no longer working there?" he asked. Sarah exhaled shakily, running a hand through her hair. "No, I was fired this morning." A long pause. Then, "I'd like to meet you tomorrow morning. I have a proposal." Sarah's grip tightened around her phone. "A proposal? You'll understand when we meet. I'll send you the details shortly. I hope to see you there." Before she could ask anything else, the line went dead. She stared at the screen, her pulse racing. What has happened? A flicker of something unfamiliar stirred inside her. Hope. From fired waitress to manager. The next morning, Sarah met James at a cafe. She had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the events that led to her being fired. Part of her was still reeling from the sudden loss of her job, while another part couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was about to unfold. She had no idea just how right she was. When she arrived, James was already seated at a corner table, sipping a cup of black coffee. He gestured for her to sit, his expression unreadable. Sarah hesitated for a moment before lowering herself into the seat across from him. "I assume you know why I called you here," James said, setting his cup down. His voice was smooth, deliberate. Sarah shook her head. "Not exactly." James leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't just a customer at Riverside Diner, Sarah. I'm the owner of the entire chain." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I visit my locations unannounced," he continued, "to see how they actually run when management isn't aware they're being watched. And what I saw at your location." He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Discrimination, favoritism, and an overall disregard for the very values I built this company on." Sarah sat frozen, her hands gripping her lap beneath the table. "But then," James said, his gaze locking onto hers, "I saw you. You treated me with the same respect you gave every other customer. Not because you thought I was important, but because it was simply the right thing to do. That's rare, and it's exactly what I need in my leadership." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you saying?" James smiled slightly. "I'm offering you the manager's position at Riverside Diner." Her breath hitched. "Me? A manager?" The words felt foreign in her mouth. James nodded. "This restaurant needs a leader who values integrity. Someone who isn't afraid to do the right thing, even when it's inconvenient. And I believe that person is you." Sarah's thoughts swirled like a storm. She had spent years taking orders, following rules, and staying out of trouble. Could she really lead? Could she fix the broken system that had made her life so difficult for so long? James seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know this is a lot, but I've been doing this for a long time, and trust me, you are more than capable." Sarah swallowed hard, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Then, with a deep breath, she nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." ______________________________________________________________________________________________________________ Sarah returned to Riverside Diner, not as a waitress, but as the new manager. The moment she stepped through the doors, the energy in the room shifted. Conversations hushed, heads turned. Lisa and Brad exchanged wide-eyed glances. The kitchen door swung open, and Mark stormed out, his face contorted in fury. "What is this?" he barked, his eyes darting between Sarah and James. Sarah stood tall, her chin lifted. "I'm the new manager, and you're fired." For a moment, Mark said nothing. Then, he let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You think you can run this place better than me?" James, who had remained silent until now, took a step forward. "I don't think," he said smoothly. "I know she can." Mark's face turned red, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "This is a joke. You can't just walk in here and—" "It's already done," James interrupted, his voice carrying an air of finality. "Pack up your things." Mark's glare flickered between them, but he could see there was no room for argument. He turned on his heel and stormed toward the office, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the diner. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The moment was victorious, but she knew it was only the beginning. Mark was gone, but the challenges ahead, they were only just beginning. A battle for control. Lisa and Brad resisted her authority from the moment she took charge. Having worked at Riverside Diner for years under Mark's lenient management, they had grown comfortable in a system that rewarded favoritism and discouraged accountability. They had benefited from the old ways, choosing who to serve, taking extra breaks, and avoiding responsibilities without consequences. Now, with Sarah enforcing fairness and efficiency, They saw her as a threat to their easygoing routine. They deliberately slowed their work, messed up orders, and even whispered to the other employees about how Sarah wasn't fit to run the diner. It was clear they were testing her, waiting for her to crumble under the pressure. At first, customers bore the brunt of their rebellion. Meals were delayed, incorrect orders piled up, and complaints became frequent. A family of four sat at a booth for nearly 40 minutes before Lisa finally brought their food cold. A man at the counter had to ask twice for a simple cup of coffee. Brad smirked as he moved at a glacial pace, clearly enjoying the chaos. Sarah knew exactly what they were doing, and she refused to let them win. Instead of reacting with anger, she stayed calm and focused. She started working twice as hard, personally stepping in to fix mistakes, apologizing to customers, and ensuring that anyone willing to do their job properly was supported. Slowly but surely, employees began to take notice. Some, who had been too afraid to stand up to Lisa and Brad before, started following Sarah's lead. One day, Sarah arrived early to review the inventory logs and notice discrepancies. Ingredients were going missing. Supplies weren't adding up. Someone was sabotaging the diner beyond just poor service. She decided to confront the issue head-on. That evening, just before closing, Sarah gathered the staff. "I know what's been happening," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I know some of you are deliberately making mistakes. I know about the missing supplies, and I know you think this will break me. But here's the truth, it won't. This diner deserves better. Our customers deserve better. If you're with me, let's make this place great. If not, you know where the door is." Silence filled the room. Lisa and Brad exchanged glances, their smirks faltering. A few employees shifted uncomfortably, but some nodded, determination flickering in their eyes. That night, Sarah noticed a shift, small but significant. By the end of the second week, Lisa started losing her influence. Employees who once followed her lead began siding with Sarah. Orders ran smoother, and customers began to take notice. Tips improved. Regulars returned. Brad, sensing the tide turning, quit. Lisa, stubborn as ever, tried to hold on, but it was clear her days were numbered. Eventually, she walked out too, slamming the door behind her. A month later, Riverside Diner had transformed. Customers noticed. Employees thrived. The toxic atmosphere that had once poisoned the place was gone. And Sarah? She had not only changed the system from the inside out, she had proven that leadership wasn't about power. It was about doing the right thing, no matter how hard it was. She had won, but she knew this was just the beginning. An even bigger opportunity. One evening, James called her back to the same cafe. The moment Sarah stepped inside, she sensed that this was more than just a casual meeting. James sat at his usual corner table, a cup of black coffee steaming in front of him. The cafe was quieter than usual, the hum of conversation subdued under the soft jazz playing through the speakers. James gestured for her to take a seat. "You didn't just fix the restaurant, Sarah. You proved that leadership is about fairness and courage. That's why I have another offer for you." Sarah leaned forward, curiosity and apprehension swirling inside her. "What kind of offer?" James took a sip of his coffee before speaking. "I want you to oversee multiple locations. Not just one restaurant, but several. There are more places just like Riverside Diner, places where toxic leadership and unfair practices have been running unchecked. I need someone who can change that. Someone like you." Sarah's heart pounded. The idea of running one restaurant had already felt like an uphill battle. Now, he was offering her something even bigger, something she had never envisioned for herself. James leaned in slightly, his gaze steady. "I need leaders who can reshape this company from the inside out. You've already proven that you can take on corruption and dismantle favoritism. Now I want you to take that same passion and apply it on a larger scale. Imagine what you could do with the authority to fix more than just one place." Sarah exhaled slowly. The weight of his words settled in. She thought about the employees at Riverside Diner who had finally found a workplace where they felt valued. The customers who had noticed the change. The shift in culture she had fought so hard to achieve. She had never pictured herself as someone who could make such a widespread difference. But maybe she had been limiting herself all along. Maybe this was her chance to do something even greater. It won't be easy, James added, as if reading her thoughts. The resistance you faced at Riverside will be 10 times stronger in some of these other locations. Some of these managers have been running things their way for years. They won't go down without a fight. Sarah smiled faintly. I think I can handle a fight. James chuckled. I know you can. That's why I'm offering this to you. Sarah glanced out the window at the city beyond, the familiar skyline of Chicago stretching before her, its towering buildings bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. This wasn't just a promotion. It was an opportunity to truly change things, to take everything she had learned and expand it beyond one small diner. With a deep breath, she turned back to James, determination gleaming in her eyes. When do I start? Sarah's journey from an overlooked waitress to a respected leader teaches us valuable lessons about integrity, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right. Her story is more than just a tale of workplace redemption. It's a reminder that change begins with a single act of courage. Integrity over convenience. Sarah could have ignored the unfair treatment happening around her, but instead, she chose to do what was right, even at the risk of losing her job. True integrity means standing firm in your values, no matter the consequences. Leadership is earned, not given. Sarah didn't start out with power. She earned it by proving she could create real change. Leadership isn't about authority. It's about setting an example and lifting others up. Change is hard, but necessary. Transforming Riverside Diner wasn't easy. Sarah faced resistance, sabotage, and doubt. But progress always comes with challenges. If we want to make a difference, we have to push through the obstacles. Fairness creates success. By eliminating favoritism and enforcing a culture of respect, Sarah not only improved employee morale, but also attracted more customers. Businesses, workplaces, and even communities thrive when fairness and inclusivity are prioritized. Opportunities come to those who take action. If Sarah had remained silent, she would have stayed stuck in the same unfair system. But by taking action, she opened doors she never imagined, proving that stepping outside of our comfort zone can lead to incredible opportunities. What this means for you. Sarah's story is proof that one person can make a difference. Whether in the workplace, in our communities, or in our daily lives, we all have the power to challenge injustice and bring about positive change. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for what's right, share your experience in the comments. Let's inspire each other to be brave and take action. Want more inspiring stories like this? Subscribe to Toch Story and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Every story has a lesson, and we're here to bring them to you.